Welcome to the Society of Construction Law Australia's podcast of the 2024 Stynes Address. My name is Kiri Parr, and I am a Director of the Society of Construction Law and Chair of its Academic Committee. Every year, a speaker is selected by SOCLA to present a thought-provoking lecture to the construction industry, the kind of speech that will challenge industry views and norms and shift the conversation. In 2024, the Stynes Address was held at the stunning Australian Museum in Sydney and was given by Gabrielle Trainor AO. Gabrielle Trainor has had a diverse career across the construction industry, but one of her most important roles of late has been as chair of the Construction Industry Culture Taskforce. This taskforce is a collaboration between the Australian Constructors Association and government agencies and has the aim of making a step change in the culture of the industry through government's procurement processes. In her Stynes Address, we received insight into the key issues facing the construction industry and practical insight into how those issues are being addressed by the taskforce. Through their development of a culture standard, the taskforce is challenging the 60 to 70-hour work weeks that are normalised across our industry. In their place, they embed a 50 to 55-hour work week, and Gabrielle Trainor shares the evidence of the positive outcomes that flow from that one change. We hope you enjoy listening to the 2024 Stynes Address.
Hi, everybody, and good evening. I, of course, acknowledge we're on Gadigal land, the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and they've been looking after this land for hundreds of centuries, and Europeans, of course, arrived about 2 centuries ago. So I acknowledge the Gadigal elders, acknowledge First Nations people with us tonight, and hope we can work to fulfil their wish to walk together into the times to come. So it is a terrific honour to have been asked to speak tonight in the footsteps of Her Honour Justice Stynes. Wonderful to meet you too, Your Honour. And this, of course, is the second eponymous address, and I thank SOCLA for the invitation and to you all for turning up tonight when pre-Christmas Thursday night drinks must surely be beckoning all over Sydney. I must say it was a tad daunting to read Her Honour's address last year. And though I sit on the advisory board of that excellent law firm, Gaydens, I haven't practiced as a lawyer since about 1980, which is before most of you were born. And I've never, ever been a specialist construction lawyer, so please indulge me. But I did note Her Honour last year said that she hoped the series would, and I quote her, offer something a little different to share ideas that challenge industry views, that cause us to question how we do our work, how we serve our industry, and whether there's a better way. So perhaps in a faint echo of Monty Python, I can now offer something completely different to you tonight. As Kiri alluded to, I've been very fortunate to have trodden many different paths across many sectors of industry through things like education, finance, insurance, politics, the law, sport. I'm actually privileged to be a member of the AFL Commission and very excited about the women's AFLW final this weekend. But the last decades have seen me often in various roles knocking around the construction industry and the infrastructure sector. And that, I suppose, traces back to when I was a consultant many years ago, and I consulted to what was then a behemoth in the industry, Leighton Holdings, and its subsidiaries. And when I began a parallel life as a non-executive director, I was appointed to the advisory board of Leighton Contractors way back then. And over the last 30 years or so, which really ages me, doesn't it? But I have been fortunate to be appointed to the boards of a number of public sector transport entities, urban development agencies such as State Rail, Sydney Transport, Rail Access, Barangaroo, Docklands, and there are others. I have recently retired as the Interim Chief Commissioner of Infrastructure Australia And as Kiri said, I do sit on a few other construction-related boards as well. But most relevantly to what I want to speak about today, it is the Construction Industry Culture Taskforce work, the CICT, that I hope you'll be interested in. I know the Construction Industry Culture Taskforce name sounds like something straight out of utopia, but I promise it is a real thing doing real work with real momentum. So when I think about all those years that I've been in and around the construction industry, I guess I've seen the best of the industry, an industry that I do love, but like many of you, I've witnessed the worst too. I've watched the industry as it has created miracles of engineering, imagination, skill and labour, and deliver quality of life to so many of us. How lucky am I to live about 250 metres from this sparkling new Crow's Nest metro station, for instance. But I have also observed through its entrenched settings and through its culture, the industry has created, almost deliberately, fundamental challenges to itself, severe knock-on effects to national productivity, and very often tragic harms to our people. So I'll set the scene first with some statistics. I mean, some of these things will be familiar to you, some won't, but all certainly are very sobering. So Australian construction workers are 6 times more likely to die of suicide than of a workplace accident, and young construction workers twice as likely than other men to take their own lives. The construction industry is on most measures the biggest in Australia, but it has the lowest gender diversity, with a 5-year average male share to this year of 87.1%, and in construction trades 98.7%. It also boasts the widest gender pay gap of any industry and worsening. 63% of construction workers in New South Wales are considering leaving the industry. Mainly because of a lack of work-life balance. There's just not enough time for them to live, to do things with their families, to exercise, to relax, and to recover from their workloads. Half of people who start trades apprentices drop out. And despite the great work of organisations like Mates in Construction, Wellness and Infrastructure, NAWIC, who are having their awards tonight, of course, and many government interventions, these statistics have really been stuck over about the last 20 years. And if we keep on the way we are, our little organisation, the CICT and Biz Oxford Economics, found that it'll cost Australia conservatively about $8 billion a year. So if you think also about the basic laws of supply and demand, that means labour and capability shortages push up costs. And unfortunately for construction, labour costs have increased markedly while productivity has declined. And you'll see this slide, which is I've actually taken from an Australian Constructors Association report, fairly recent report, and see the delta between wages and productivity being the orange line. That is a massive gap and uncharacteristic of most other industries. Infrastructure Australia estimates a construction workforce shortfall of 229,000 people, which is about the size of the current infrastructure workforce. So we need to double in order to fulfil the pipeline of projects that are in the list announced between now and 2027. That's $230 billion worth of projects. And more generally, the building sector will fall short of needed workers by 370,000 by 2030. That's according to Build Skills Australia. So with all these problems, challenges in the industry, and mind you, the industry still keeps on delivering extraordinary projects, but the response has really been just to work the people we've got harder. 60 to 70 hours, not uncommon, around 50, 55 are still way above recommended hours, but that's about the norm. And Saturday work is, of course, de rigueur. The rate of wages growth has gone up from 1.5% to 4%, and that is, it's more than doubled between now and 4 years ago. And labour and materials escalation, you'll all be familiar with that. Oxford Economics reckon that if you've got $1 billion mega project at the moment, by 2028, it will cost you an extra $200 million to complete it. Your developer clients are undoubtedly telling you that feasibility studies just aren't stacking up, and this is less than the news we want to hear during a housing crisis. As we know, 2,832 construction companies went bust last year, and while fresh numbers are hard to find, in 2009, and you'll all know this statistic, disputes were estimated to cost a total of $7 billion a year, up to about $840 million each year. And I reckon those numbers seem pretty conservative today. So before we all run out of the room wailing and gnashing our teeth, I do want to talk tonight about some heartening work that, while not a silver bullet, provides some hope that working collaboratively, progress in addressing some of the main features ailing the industry workforce, at least at the infrastructure end, is beginning to be made. And because it involves government procurement and contractual accountability against some relatively new regulatory and compliance obligations, I hope it may be of interest to you all as construction lawyers. So how did this work start? Well, it became obvious back in 2018 that the platform of the industry was well and truly alight. The era of mega projects was upon us, and from a national pipeline of about $4 billion worth of projects in 2016, the infrastructure industry was staring in the face of a wall of projects totalling over $20 billion by 2024. So with this tsunami coming toward the industry in the state that it was in, there was a great deal of consternation about how these projects can possibly be built at all, much less efficiently for taxpayers, in an industry boasting those statistics that I've just gone through, and with productivity actually having declined almost 8% in the past 20 years. So the Australian Constructors Association and the two largest states got together to form a coalition of the willing, and they started a thing called the Construction Industry Leadership Forum, SILF. There are acronyms everywhere, aren't there? Back in 2017, and the then head of the ACA, a fellow called Craig Laslett, some of you may know Craig, often described their agenda as threefold. Three parties, threefold agenda. Firstly, matters to do with the commerciality of the industry, risk allocation, contracting terms, contracting typologies leading to adversarial posturing, cost of bidding, dispute resolution, etc. So those commercial issues and contracting issues were in one basket. The second basket of issues that the SILF was looking to try and address were those around capacity and capability, the skills and labour shortage that I've just spoken about at acute levels, even back then, and worsened since. And the third interrelated feature that the SILF wanted to look at was the culture of the industry. Industry culture was seen to be a major problem, deterring people from becoming part of the industry, causing serious harms and effectively barring half the population from participating. He rightly, Craig that is, described these challenges as three legs of a stool. He used that metaphor. It stuck with me. Interrelated and interdependent. And as culture was seen to be such a critical issue, it was hived off to a special group to consider what could be done. That's where I came in 2018. It was sold to me as a 2-year job, and 6 years later, we're still into it. But before I go to that in a bit more detail, I guess you might be asking what's happened to these other legs of the stool. Some of you will know this very well, but the SILF and many others continue very good work. And a thing called the National Construction Industry Forum has been set up by the Feds as a tripartite forum for government, contractors and unions. In the meantime, jurisdictions have set up various fora for cooperative discussions to try and nut out some of these challenges for the industry. And on that first leg of the stool, commerciality, I guess you've all seen the rise of different kinds of contracts. You would have seen alliances becoming much more prevalent, some real, some not quite so real, ITCs, ECIs. And while it's difficult to stay true to a less adversarial approach, a more collaborative solution-seeking style is patchily developing. But still, many of the current major mega projects were contracted before this more collaborative approach, and some huge, lengthy and costly disputes and I'm sure you're familiar with many of these, still prevail. Treasuries, central agencies instinctively seek to drive down project costs when they're out for bidding in the name of value for money, thinking more of the immediate financial cost of a project rather than the total economic cost, short-term and long-term. And heaven forbid, heroic completion timelines still, in amazing coincidences, are set to line up with election cycle ribbon cutting and PPE photo opportunities. The significant post-COVID escalation did serious further damage to huge and complex projects that are notoriously hard to scope at the outset anyway, and they're usually victims of optimism bias and power dynamics anyway. The political class, as we read almost daily, is constantly taunted with headlines announcing one massive cost blowout or another, when we know, everybody knows, that large-scale international research tells us that these kind of blowouts are not uncommon. In fact, recent international research of many hundreds, thousands of projects tells us that 99.5% of large complex projects fail to deliver on time, cost and the realised benefits. So there's a lot more to do on project planning, particularly using digital tools and lessons learned, honest data and effective contracting yet. So the second leg of that stool, capacity and capability, there's an enormous amount going on in that field because, frankly, it needs to. And the initiatives that are being pursued range from encouraging small children to adopt more neutral gender role models, to finding more and better teachers and more students to learn STEM subjects, mentors, role models, trying to address childcare, parental leave, flexible and part-time hours, setting up new jobs and skills councils like Build Skills, Free TAFE, skilled migration. There's a plethora of activity. Governments have set targets for women in construction, notably the Victorian BEP, Building Policy, and WGEA has stepped up its reporting. There are apprenticeships incentives. There's so much going on there to try and address this acute skills and capability shortage. They're just some of the initiatives designed to chip away at this wicked problem, and we could talk until Christmas if we went into all of those. But the culture, the culture limb of the three-legged stool was spun off to our Taskforce group, the CICT. The primary funding partners, as has been said, are those three entities that started out, the ACA, the Constructors Association and the New South Wales and Victorian governments, and their support is magnificent. As Kiri said, other jurisdictions have now joined in. So we've got South Australia at the west, Queensland and ACT as well, and most importantly, in many ways, the Commonwealth. Various delivery and policy agencies like Infrastructure Australia and Transport for New South Wales also sit around the Taskforce table. Now, the idea is pretty simple, really, and that is to level the playing field for contractors and for governments to use their procurement levers to require change through compliance and accountability for a standard on workplace culture, not only at head contractor level, but to be pushed through the supply chain and supported through the supply chain. The procurement lever has been used before, as we all know, for social procurement issues like Aboriginal employment, legacy skills, local business participation. So why not to create the step change that the industry itself seems incapable of making, and for the client agencies to take responsibility for the consequences of the demands they make of contractors and the resulting state of the industry. So the task was how to develop a standard that would make a difference and whose adoption would be practical. Well, we put together a group of experienced industry people, contractors, delivery agencies, policy people and academics. It's a loose, non-hierarchical, non-bureaucratic kind of group, slightly maverick, resourced by part-time donated people and volunteers with the focus on the funds going straight to the research. And our initial research, and we've got an extraordinary research team led by Professor Helen Lingard from RMIT. Some of you will know distinguished Professor Lingard. That initial research that we did demonstrated there'd been a lot of attention always given to programs on mental health and gender diversity, tons of them. But why hadn't they worked? There'd been no significant change. Based on an extensive initial lit review, it became clear that excessive and inflexible working hours were at the heart of the unattractiveness of the industry, not only to women, but increasingly to young men, and also one of the main drivers of mental ill health and high attrition. And as the three-legged stool metaphor applied to the broader issues, so these three factors, working hours and flexibility, health and wellbeing, and diversity, needed a holistic approach to which proponents would have to comply in their project bids. So the job of the Taskforce became to build an evidence base on which to develop an integrated, pragmatic set of elements in a standard, hopefully ultimately to be harmonised across Australian jurisdictions. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen this diagram before. It was designed as a flexible framework for clients and contractors to address those cultural challenges. I won't dwell on the detail, or we really will be here till Christmas, but you'll find it on our website, cultureinconstruction.com.au. But in short, though, you'll see here the three interrelated themes, the concentric circles, time for life, diversity and inclusion, and wellbeing. And all our research and experience now says they need to be tackled together to truly make a difference. And that's exactly what the standard does. As I said, each of these themes includes requirements and plans to be addressed by tenderers and clients as part of the procurement process. There's very little that is actually prescriptive under the three headings, except for working hours. That is, a cap of an average of 50 hours per week for any individual on a site, with flexibility built into that, and even better, if the hours are spread over 5 days, Monday to Friday, optimally, or whenever possible with 2 consecutive days off for recovery. In building an evidence base, piloting and studying the effects of the standard once we'd developed it and consulted on it was naturally essential, the name of the game. So here are the 5 pilot projects, a mix of vertical and horizontal alliances and D&Cs, road and rail, city and peri-urban across Victoria and New South Wales. Some of you may know these projects very well. Compliance came with the standard across these pilot projects came in many forms. The site managers and the people involved in the projects, including the unions, were very inventive in programming their working hours to comply with the standard and yet allow the flexibility that some of the projects needed with occupations and considerations about public amenity and kit that need to be run 24/7, all of those kind of things. So some did allow Saturday work as they need to, especially for horizontal projects. And we've recently tweaked the word in the hours standard to make that crystal clear that there's been a bit of mythology that we're advocating strictly Monday to Friday work, and where that's possible, that is clearly optimum, but it's not always possible, and we absolutely acknowledge that. A site, of course, can work 24/7 if it needs to, and it can also comply with the standard in doing so, as long as each individual averages no more than 50 hours, and within that has some flexibility. So we've been studying these 5 pilot projects over the past 2 years, and I'll cut straight to the chase. The key findings of the pilots that we released in our interim report, and you'll see that on our website, and elaborated on when we release our final report next year, is that the application of the standard across these 5 projects and 2 years has made the kind of difference we hypothesised that it would. Now, while seeing the full effects of the standard is a longitudinal task, there is some early, solid and very welcome news. We're completing a cost-benefit analysis with Frontier Economics, which shows that the culture standard has a significant and measurable impact on retention. Retention rates are, I won't tell you the number, but they are significantly higher compared with industry norms. Now, that means a whole lot of benefits. It also means retention is a proxy for attraction. So I think we can draw some lines between the application of the standard and the attractiveness of the industry, which is one of the key reasons we were set up, to try and make the industry a better environment so people, young men and women, would be more inclined to consider construction as a career. The other things that have been found in the research that I can tell you at a high level, but you'll have to hang on for the full report, is that we've found quality of life is greatly improved for people on the site. There's no evidence of project cost or timelines being negatively affected, and there is some evidence that productivity has in fact been improved. So, as I said, our final report will come out in the new year. That's a bit of a sneak preview for you. And one of the things we are working on, because we know implementing this is no mean feat, though we're trying to make it as simple and cohesive and coordinated as possible across jurisdictions and across agencies, we will release a family of implementation tools and guidance for proponents and for clients. So the pilots have shown not only that you need to think about culture holistically and pay accountable attention to diversity and health and wellbeing, especially mental health, but that the most powerful catalyst for creating change is our requirement on hours of work, flexibility and working days. The magic happens when the client delivery agencies and the unions also buy into this solution, and you add the initiatives on diversity and health. And another bonus of the standard, I guess, is that when it's applied, it is a systematic way to help address psychosocial risks, including harassment and bullying. The consensus on the sites is where the standard applies, they are much more respectful workplaces. Even things like banter that are characteristic of construction sites are way reduced. It's just a very different environment of mutual respect. Now, we had 600 people register for a webinar last week to hear the experiences of the pilots. So I'd like to run, with Scott's help, just a very short piece, I promise it's short, just so you can see a little bit more and hear directly from some of the people involved in the pilots. So today's webinar has been set up to broaden knowledge about the construction industry culture standard, which has been developed to operate as part of government procurement and has been trialled and researched over the past 2 years. So we're going to hear about the research findings to date, the experience in the pilots from contractors and delivery agencies. We're going to hear some observations from early adopters and our work on supporting implementation with guidance tools, and then what's next. As part of the program, we thought it was important to complete a cost-benefit analysis. It is showing that there's no evidence of projects' cost or timelines being negatively affected.
We were hearing from industry a whole series of problems around skills shortages, around cost escalations, around overheating in the market, and around problems with procurement. The crisis of culture within the sector and what needed to change. And it was a huge call to arms for us that led to the initial mobilisation of the Construction Industry Culture Taskforce.
The primary funding entities of the Taskforce are those three bodies, the ACA, the New South Wales and Victorian governments, and their support over these years. Other jurisdictions have now joined the Taskforce: South Australia, Western Australia, Queensland and the ACT. This does create a level playing field for proponents. It requires delivery agencies to lean in, to be part of the solution and to develop mutual accountability. The culture standards are flexible framework for clients and contractors to address those cultural issues, to help make infrastructure construction particularly, but construction more generally, an industry chosen by more people. Now, it's a myth that the standard strictly requires Monday to Friday work regime, or that it's all about mysterious women's business. As I said, compliance with the standard comes in many forms, that a lot of it is in the hands of proponents to actually comply with the standard in their own way.
Findings showed us is that the culture standard is not prescriptive, with a positive response once they had experienced the benefit.
So the overarching approach to the CICT program, we centred around communication. We understood that by communicating the intention of what we were trying to achieve, we would naturally get the buy-in from those involved.
They're all working, the 50-hour, 5-day weeks every single week, the same RDOs, 21 days less per year, and getting equivalent pay far exceeded all those targets.
What the culture standard delivered for us was a really high level of commitment very early on.
The initiatives have been a resounding success, and it's evident that the culture change is possible.
We're mad if we don't all get on board. I don't see why we couldn't just roll this culture standard out.
Moved our focus towards implementation and adoption of the standard, the continued engagement with jurisdictions nationally to support planning for the adoption of the standard, and also the development of support materials and resources.
we decided to give ourselves a 12-month trial where we have included the CICT in every one of our major tenders, working in partnership with industry to help move things forward. So we're in the middle of this trial, so we're still sort of working our way through it. We've had a really interesting response.
We just want to roll it out, ensure that we do have a consistent approach. We measure safety, we measure time, and measure to cost, but this is also how we measure cultures.
Just to reiterate, continuing to do the same is just not an option. And our pilot project, here they are, show us that change is possible, practical and beneficial. We think the culture standard has a very strong part to play in repositioning the industry, making it more attractive and providing a much better environment for our people. I'm treating you all as ambassadors now for the work that we've been doing, so hopefully this is a step up in spreading the word.
I don't know who that woman is in the black ski, by the way. Yeah, we had 600 people listening into that, and they all stayed for an hour and a half. So you only got 4 minutes, luckily. But it really does show that people are getting serious about looking at these underpinnings of the industry. But we are really aware that the culture standard does need to deliver value, not just for the industry, but also for the investment of taxpayer dollars in our infrastructure projects. And we know change is not easy. The industry is under enormous pressure, time and cost pressure, and there needs to be a very robust case for reform, which we think that our work and our evidence is close to developing in the most compelling way. Momentum is with us, as you've seen. Change is happening. The Commonwealth is asking jurisdictions, that's Jim Betts that you saw there, asking jurisdictions to be accountable for acquiring culture change on transport projects for which it's providing support under the recently concluded Federation funding agreements with the states and the Notes of Administration. So the Commonwealth's saying that if you want our funding, states, for infrastructure projects, you are going to have to address industry culture as part of your procurement. That was a big step forward. Jim Betts was one of the people at the very beginning when he was at Infrastructure New South Wales who made that call to arms that he spoke about. Jurisdictions, as you've seen, are already building the standard into procurements, and New South Wales has just announced Parramatta Light Rail 2 in its contract with John Holland will be applying the culture standard. Minister Halen is a great advocate for it. It looks like an idea whose time, if not has come, at least it's coming, and it's coming fast, at least in government procurement. It's interesting too, we've had interest from the private sector. Private developers have asked us about their role or their potential role in using something like a culture standard in their own procurements, more from the point of view, I think, of compliance and ESG, a sort of top-down approach rather than a bottom-up approach. But we have significant interest from some of the major developers and construction companies in the culture standard. As wise Craig Laslett said, tackling workplace culture in the construction industry is inextricable from the way clients and firms contract and behave, and that includes industrial behaviour, and it's inextricable from the complex reasons that not nearly enough people see construction as an industry of choice. If you look back on industry conferences that took place in 2017 and 2018, the main topics were technology, really, BIM, digital twins, efficiency projects, and I suppose the self agenda, other than culture. Contracting's always been a red-hot issue in the industry. But certainly culture 5 years ago didn't really make much of a mention, though gender diversity has always had a bit of a niche following, but a pretty feminised one. Nowadays, the productivity discussion is front and centre, and culture is very much in that story. And I'd like to think, even with a bit of humility, that our project might have played a small part in this. But when you think about it, it's not just construction that's been pulled and pushed to address culture. It's all workplaces, especially since the pandemic. Tried to say it, the world has changed. Expectations of our working environments are way different to when I was a lawyer back in 1979, when how high was the only response to a client's request to jump, even if it meant a series of all-nighters and pizza for dinner every night for a week. Gen Zillennials in particular have demanded change. Dads want to participate in the lives of their kids more and assume a more balanced role in households. The Me Too movement, I think, played a part in this. The pandemic, of course. Working people, especially the young, no longer see themselves as mere units of production, and they're demanding that their workplaces treat them accordingly. People centricity is the new and essential perspective. Working from home to better align work and life balance is a fixture now, not an occasional privilege. And of course, in the background, the regulators have spoken with psychosocial regs, respect at work, right to disconnect, all happening in the last few years. Workplace health and safety now means more than LTI statistics and campaigns to wear proper gloves on site. We've shouted safety but whispered health for far too long. Mental health and wellbeing, as well as equity and diversity, whistleblower and complaints processes are centre stage in workplaces across the nation, across the world really. In the interest of time, I won't attempt to open a discussion on any takeouts of the culture standard in considering law firm culture or the broader professional services workplace, and that's a topic for another day, but I can see some of you might already have some musings on this. But from my part, working on the culture standard has been an extraordinary and uplifting experience. It has been a genuine pleasure to have collaborated with so many people, great people, clients, policymakers, contractors who really do want to work together to make the industry one where people, many more people, can thrive. And it seems we're slowly getting there. So as legal professionals, you have a unique role in helping to shape the culture of the construction industry. Your influence extends beyond the courtroom and the negotiating table. It permeates the way projects are conceived, planned, executed, and how the contracting parties interact, resolve differences, and how clients see their priorities. So I know we can all play a part in making this industry, in which we're also involved, much more productive. If construction flourishes, so too does the rest of the country, and it's a national imperative for us all to work toward that. So I hope I've fulfilled Her Honour's aspiration for the address as something that perhaps is a bit provoking and helps make a difference in the industry. I'll, of course, be very pleased to take some questions, and I'll just simply conclude by saying it is a great privilege to have been asked to speak to you tonight. I thank everyone involved in making this evening happening and wish SOCLA continued success, and congratulations to the Brooking Prize winners as well. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to seeing you in person at our next Stynes Address, held in November each year. Check out the SOCLA website, scl.org.au, for the next event.